Hey, so I know you guys are all stuck at home with the coronavirus and you're going out of your mind with boredom. Well, I have a project for you. You're going to make your very own sourdough bread. This is the most delicious, fragrant bread. It's really easy to make. You use 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. It'll fill the whole house with fragrance. You can make extra loaves and leave them as a gift for your neighbors without ever getting in contact with them. Anyhow, it's a marvelous project. It'll stop you getting bored and you'll really enjoy it. So follow along and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so now here's the moment of truth. We're going to cut into this loaf and see what it looks like. I baked this about half an hour ago. Maybe it needs a little longer to cool, but we can see. So, here we are. Delicious, crispy crust. Oh, the sound of that is amazing. And then as you cut in, a little puff of steam comes up, and look at that crumb. Oh my God, beautiful. Beautiful holes and cavities, a lovely chewy, spongy inside, and hard crust on the outside. Golden brown. Oh my God, I can't wait to get the butter and cover it in butter from Ireland. Okay, so now the real moment of truth. This is where the butter comes in. And I know some of you people out there are vegan and you're going to want to put olive oil on this bread, which is perfectly acceptable, nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to do butter, you might as well do the real thing. Kerrygold is my favorite butter from Ireland. As you may have guessed, I'm from Ireland too. I also have my cup of tea, which is Barry's tea, also from Ireland. Don't drink any of that nonsense that they try and pawn off on you in the United States. Anyhow, we're going to put a little butter on this bread and I'm going to be in nirvana for the next 5 minutes. So a little butter. Oh my God. So good. This is an essential Irishman's coronavirus survival kit. Except for you probably need a bit of the old Jameson whiskey there, except it's only 11 in the morning. So anyhow, bit of butter. Let's just see how this goes down. Oh my God, this is so good. I've died and gone to heaven. This is the best. Okay, so we're going to make the sourdough bread. Now, I spoke to you a moment ago about the ingredients, the basic ingredients, the flour, the water, the salt. That's all fine. But you're going to need something a little bit more than that. You're going to need something to allow the dough to rise. You need a leavening agent. If you were making traditional bread, say a French bread or a baguette, you could go to the store and buy those little packets, the little sachets that you open up and put that into your flour and water mix, and you can make your bread. But in this case, we are going to use wild yeast. Now, that's all over the place. You find wild yeast floating around in the air. It's out all over the environment. It's already on the flour. Now, you say to yourself, well, how am I going to do that? How am I going to get some of that? Go out for a walk in the environment and come home with a couple of handfuls of wild yeast? Well, no, it's not that complicated. All you do is you make a little mixture of flour and water, and you put that in a container on your countertop, and the naturally occurring yeasts that are already on the flour, they'll start to grow in that mix, along with the probiotic bacteria that are also present. They're the sort of bacteria you find in yogurt and that ferment beer. And those will be absolutely marvelous to bring out the sour flavor in the bread. So let me show you how to do that. It's great. Okay, to make our sourdough starter, what we're going to do, it's very simple. I use a little weighing scale, a little digital scale that shows you the weights of things in grams, very handy. And I have a little glass container here that has a lid on it. Very simple, it could be anything. It could be a jam jar or a little Tupperware container, whatever. So all you do is put that on your weighing scales, turn the scale on, and when it gets to 0, you're going to add just whole wheat flour. Whole wheat is better than white flour for this because it has more of the yeast and the naturally occurring bacteria that you're going to need. So you add, say, 100 grams of this into the container. So I just pour that in. There's 112 grams. It doesn't have to be accurate, but what you do add is you add the same amount of water as whatever flour you've added. So zero out the scales, and now I'll add, there you are, about the same amount of water. And I'll stir that up. And that's going to be the basis for our sourdough starter. After a day, you might notice a few bubbles starting to grow in this if you leave it out on the counter. But that's not strong enough. You need it to be doing lots and lots of bubbles. So what you have to do then is, after day one, at the same time, you throw away half of the stuff, or most of the stuff. In fact, you only leave about a tablespoon of this material left. And you add the same amount of flour and water as you did today. So another 100 grams, another 100 grams of water. And so you do that feeding process for about 3 days. And after that 3 days, you'll notice that maybe 3 or 4 hours after you've fed it, that you've got all these wonderful bubbles growing in it. That's a really good active starter that you're going to use for baking. Okay, so we're going to start to bake now. We have our starter. It's been about 4 hours since I fed this. And if you look inside there, you can see the starter, and it's got a nice amount of bubbles inside it. It's kind of got a nice structure to it. Doesn't fall apart, doesn't go all liquidy when you squeeze it, but that's perfectly active now. It's full of bubbles, full of yeast and bacteria, ready to go. So I'm going to add that to the flour and water now. So now we're going to start baking the actual loaf. This is the day before we're going to bake it. We're going to prepare the dough. So for this recipe, I'm going to want 2 loaves, and we'll need a total weight of about 700 grams of flour. And for this recipe, I'm going to use 600 grams of white flour, and I like to use organic. So there's about 550 of white flour, 575. And then I'm going to add a little bit of whole wheat flour in. I like to always add a little bit of whole wheat in because it just makes the bread a little tastier in my estimation, but you can vary it any way you want to. You can put all white flour, and you can do, but it's best not to do all whole wheat flour. You need a good proportion of all white flour to make it work. The maximum amount of whole wheat flour that you should put in is probably somewhere around 20% or so. So I'm adding in about, so there's a total of 700 grams of the flour, okay? And now to that, I'm going to make this a 70% solution of water with the flour. So in other words, whatever the weight of the flour is, you add 70% of that in water. So in that case, it's going to be 490 grams. So once again, zero that one out, and I add in 490 grams of water, which is the same as 490 milliliters. You just add that into the flour mix. There we are. And then we give that a good stir. Give that a good stir and mix it all through. Doesn't have to be on the scales anymore. Turn that off and set it here on the cloth, and then it'll make it, we can stir that up well. You just want to make sure that all the flour is hydrated, got the water mixed through it. It's very important this phase, because we're not going to actually do any kneading with this particular recipe. All we're going to do is mix the flour and water, and then we're going to add the starter in about half an hour. Okay, so there's the flour and water mix. Still haven't added any starter to it. And what I'm going to do is leave it for half an hour. What that allows the dough to do is to sort of build up this wonderful mesh of flour proteins that will eventually trap all the little bubbles inside it. So it's really important to leave it a little bit of time. Half an hour is all you need to let this get fully hydrated. So I like to just cover it up with a piece of plastic. You could use, you know, the plastic wrap stuff. I just happen to have clear plastic bag from the grocery store, just put that over it and just leave it out on the counter for half an hour. Okay, so the dough's been sitting there for about a half an hour now, so I'm just going to take the plastic cover off. And now comes the time to add the starter. Now here's the starter, which has been fed about 4.5 hours ago, and you can see it's nice and sort of spongy and sticky. And I'm going to put like a good clump of that, which we know is about 200 grams or so. I'll leave some for getting new starter going tomorrow. And I like to just do it with my hands and then mix the existing hydrated dough with that sticky starter. You just gradually pick up a corner and fold it over. And you keep working around the bowl like that, and then you gradually mix it in. You should do this for about 5 minutes or so until it's nicely mixed in, and kind of, it's not going to be very smooth, but it doesn't really matter at this point. You're just getting a basic mix of the ingredients so that the starter is distributed well through the existing dough that you've made. So maybe just keep going at this for 5 minutes until you get bored, and then stop. Okay, so that's been mixed through. It's now kind of uniform in texture. It's kind of lumpy still, and that's okay. We just leave that to sit in the bowl for another half an hour, and I'll cover it with the plastic once again. The reason you put the plastic over it is just to stop it drying out if it's a very hot day, and keeps the moisture in. Other than that, no real problem with that. Okay, so now a half an hour has expired. The dough has been sitting with the starter in it for half an hour, and there it is. And now it's time to add the salt. So the reason you don't add the salt first is to give the starter a chance to work and grow into the little gaps in between the mesh in the flour mix. So now we're going to add 14 grams of salt. And the reason it's 14 grams is it's 2 grams for every 100 grams of flour that you have in your mix. So we have 700 grams of flour, so that's 7 times 2 is 14. So I just put it on the weighing scales and measure out 14 grams, and it's about the size of like a half an egg, I suppose. Yeah, about that much, 14 grams. And then you mix that into the dough by, one thing you can do is just wet your hand and make some holes like that, and then shake the salt in like this. And then once again, with wet hands, you can fold this dough over various ways like this. You just do that for a few minutes, just like you did before. It's probably about 5 or 10 minutes, just stirring that salt in so that it's completely mixed through the dough. Okay, so the dough has now been mixed, and the salt is mixed into it, so I'm just going to cover it with the plastic and leave it sit for another half an hour. Okay, so now the next part is the part that you would normally start kneading the bread. But in this case, we're not going to knead the bread at all. What we're going to do is put it in a pan and turn it over and over a few times. But it's nothing near the amount of work that kneading is. So here we have the dough. It's just had the salt added about half an hour ago. And we're going to take it out and roll it out on the counter. Okay, so to roll this out on the counter, what we're going to do is just use a spray bottle, a little ordinary spray bottle, and it's filled with water. And I'm just going to wet the countertop down. You can do this on your kitchen counter, or you can do it on a big cutting board either, but it's great on the countertop. So just take that out, and then with your hands, which are wet as well, you can just scoop the dough out of the bowl directly out onto the countertop in yonder fashion. You can use a dough scraper or a spatula either if you want to get that out a bit more easily. There it is. Anyway, out on the counter like that. And the next thing to do is to, once again, make sure your hands are wet. And then you're just going to spread the dough out in this way. And what this does is it makes this sort of big web of the fibers in the dough, and then they get stretched nicely. And then the next hour and a half or so, you're going to turn the dough over several times and stretch those fibers even longer. And that's what's going to give you the great chewy texture on the loaf when you go to cut it, when it's finally baked. So you spread it out like that until it's, you know, about the size, about, I don't know, the size of a tray. And then you just fold it in half, or not in half, in a third, like that. And then fold a third on top of that. And then fold this a third that way, and a third that way. Then you just take a regular old glass casserole baking pan and just pop the dough upside down in that. And once again, you'll leave it for half an hour covered in the plastic. And that's all there really is. You're going to do that 2 more times, and then you're going to put it in the baskets, get ready to bake it. Okay, so now it is time to start to stretch this dough, which is kind of the process that is the equivalent to kneading it. But in this case, what we're going to do is just take it out of the plastic, and then we're going to stretch it. So what you do is you wet your hands so that the dough doesn't stick to them, and you lift it up out of the container by the middle. You grab it and pull it upwards, and it's kind of this big sticky mass, but it'll stick together. And you can kind of let it droop downwards, and you can squeeze it like that, and then let it fold over and then down again. What you're doing is you're stretching it, and you're stretching the fibers in the dough so that they elongate, right? And if you find any bubbles forming on the outside, you can just pop those and let it hang downwards like this. And then you can fold it over once again over your hand like this till it is completely folded over like a towel, and then pop it back into the baking pan. Cover it up with plastic, and you leave it for another half an hour, and that's all there is. There's no fancy kneading where you have to go for 10 minutes pounding away on it. So you just do that 3 times, and then you're ready to pop it into the baskets to bake. Okay, so now it's time to actually take the dough, now that it's risen and we've turned it over a few times in the container. So we're going to take it out of the plastic, and we're going to put it into the little baskets that are used to proof it. So this is the part where you put the dough into these baskets, and then it goes into the fridge overnight. And what that does is it allows the dough to develop that really lovely sour flavor. It's already risen quite a bit, but by leaving it overnight in the fridge, it gives that great flavor that's kind of unique to sourdough. So here it is, it's in the container. What we're going to do is plop it out on the counter. So we generally just spread a little bit of flour, and it's good to use, you can use brown rice flour because it seems to stick less than regular flour for some reason. I don't know why that is. You can also dash a little bit into these baskets that have the cloth liner inside them. And you just take the container of dough and gradually let it fall out of the container onto the countertop. It's sometimes a bit more sticky than others, but it'll eventually come out and fall onto the counter. There we are, just like that. So now we have enough dough here to make 2 loaves. So what we're going to do is divide that into 2, and the best tool to use for that is just a little bench scraper, a little plastic tool like this. You can use a knife either if necessary, but you just cut the dough in half, and it won't stick to the counter if it has that little bit of flour underneath it. So with each of these pieces of flour of dough, you then stretch it out a little bit like that, and then what you're going to try and do is fold it up in such a way that it builds a little bit of tension inside the dough. So you kind of fold it back a little bit, and then sort of from alternate sides just grab little pieces of it and bring it across into the center like this. So that's what we do, kind of like as if you were plaiting it. And then what you do is roll it up like this, and it gradually becomes a nice little tense little ball of dough. And there's a seam on the top of it there where the dough sticks together, and you can pinch that together to make sure that it's all nice and tight. So there it is, a nice little tight ball of dough that we're going to use to make the loaves with. Okay, so once again, we've kind of stretched this one out a little bit, and then we fold in the ends like this, and then you can kind of pinch pieces off the side and sort of fold them over alternately like this. And what you're doing is you're kind of stretching the dough from the outside towards the inside so that it's got nice tension to it. And then you kind of start at one end and roll it up like a Swiss roll. And you're kind of squeezing it and rolling it at the same time. And then you end up with a seam along the top. And then you can pinch that together and pinch out any bubbles. And as you can see, as usual, one of them is much bigger than the other. Oh well, no worries there. What we're going to do now is just pop that into the little baskets. You can put a little bit of flour, as I said, into the baskets, and then just pick the dough up and pop that into the basket. And you can roll it in a little bit more flour and pop it in there. And then what you can do is cover these up with plastic once again, and they go into the fridge overnight. And then tomorrow morning, at any time you want to in the morning, in fact, you can bake at any time between tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon, you can pop these out of the fridge, having prepared your oven, and then bake them. Very good. Ready to go in the fridge. Okay, so today is bake day. What we're going to do is put the bread that we've got in the fridge right now, we're going to take that out of the little pans, and we're going to place it in this container here, which I'm going to preheat in the oven. So this is just a big casserole, and you could use any one you like to do this, as long as it has a tight-fitting lid. And the reason you need a tight-fitting lid is the bread is going to generate steam as it cooks, and you want to hold that steam in there because that'll make the crust stay nice and soft while it rises and give you a nice hard crust afterwards when it starts to bake. Okay, so we're going to turn the oven on to 450, and then we're going to preheat it up with this thing in there so that it gets nice and hot. All right. Okay, so now the moment of truth. We've got the loaves that were in the fridge overnight. We'll take them out, and there they are in their little baskets. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn those out onto these sheets of parchment paper. It's very handy. I've used this one before, as you can see, because it's a little bit brown there. And I'll just turn the bread out onto that, and then I'll use that as a little way of carrying that and putting it inside the pan. Okay, so let me show you what we do. Okay, so we're going to take the loaf and just put your hand underneath the parchment paper and place the loaf down, and then it comes out really nicely like that, with no muss, no fuss. And we have the second one here. Do the same with that. And just pop that out. So now the important thing to do now is to take a razor blade, just a regular razor blade. This one is one of those one-sided blades. And we're just going to make a slash along the top of it. Not deeply, but on a shallow angle. And it's a sort of a confident cut that you've got to do. And the reason for that is it's to allow the bread to rise but not split open. So here we go. Just a nice confident kind of cut along the side of the bread. I'll do the other side as well. Like that. And do it on this one. Confident slash. And along the side there. Now it's ready to go in the oven, and you can pick it up like this and put it into the pan. Okay, so here we are. Open the oven door, and a big blast of hot air comes out. Slide the tray out, and you can see there's 2 casseroles in here. I'm going to take the lid off that. See, there's some hot air coming out. And I'll just take the parchment paper. I use it without the oven glove because you don't have to touch the sides of the pot. And just drop that in gently. And then what I do is I have a water sprayer. And what I do is then, a simple water sprayer again, lift up that lid with the oven glove on, make sure. Spray that, you get a little bit of steam, and spray in there, a little bit of steam, cover that up. Okay, and then we'll do the other one. Lid off that one as well. Get the other bread. Pop that into the smaller pan. we are. And once again with our little spray bottle, spray a little bit of water on that. Got some steam going there. And now we're just going to push these back into the oven, and they'll stay in there for 25 minutes with those lids on. After 25 minutes, I'll take the lids off. So the 25 minutes are up. Now it's time to take these loaves out of the oven. I'm going to take the containers out, and you can see how they look. So there's the first one. And you can see the little ears have formed on the loaf. And I'm going to just use my bare hands to take the parchment paper out. There's a handy thing about parchment paper, you can lift it out very easily, and you can see your dough. Now this is just the first bake. What I'm now going to do is put it back in the oven, but without the container. I use my oven gloves there. You can see it's a little bit brown on the underside. We're only gone halfway through the bake so far. So that's the first one, and here comes the second one. Okay. Bigger one. Ooh, lovely. And then I'm going to take that one out as well. So just carefully not touch the sides of the pot. Take the parchment paper out with the loaf there on, and pop that into the oven as well. Okay, so then close the oven up, and the oven goes back down to like 400 at this point. Okay, leave it in for another 25 minutes. We should be good. Okay, so the time has come to take the loaves out. They've been in for 25 minutes in the pans, and now another 25 minutes just sitting on the racks. So we're going to go in here and see what we've got. Look at that. Oh my God. So as you take them out, see this one's a little bit maybe overdone on the bottom, but not too bad. They should sound hollow when you hit them. And this one looks great. It's got a nice crispy crust. So what I'll do is I'll just put this out on the rack to dry for a little bit. Not dry, but to cool down. Here comes the other one. Yeah, sounds great, looks great, smells delicious. Okay. Okay, so there they are, the 2 loaves of bread. They're sitting there cooling on the rack. They make a very satisfying sound as they cool. It's sort of a crinkling, crunchy sound. The bread itself is very satisfying to make, and it's really delicious. So there's a project for you as you're enduring the shelter-in-place laws because of the coronavirus. So next time you go to the store in the middle of the night when there's nobody there hoarding toilet paper and basic commodities like flour, you can get yourself some flour and come home and bake some bread. Don't forget to buy the Kerrygold butter as well. Or if you're vegan, buy some olive oil. Anyhow, enjoy. It's really easy to do. And you can always give one away to your friends, leave it on their doorstep, and then text them that you've left it on their doorstep. Whatever you do, don't go and see them and start eating bread together. That's really dangerous. Okay, enjoy your time.